Hi everyone, welcome to the Dyslexia and Academic Success Back to School webinar series. The webinar is going to be hosted by me. I'm James Porter. I'm Community Manager here at the Tutor Crowd. I'll be the one asking the questions. The two main presenters are Stephen and Patrick. Both presenters are dyslexic themselves, so we're hoping for a really insightful interactive webinar series from people who've dealt with dyslexia their whole life. Stephen is a published dyslexia author. He blogs at dyslexiawayofthinking.co.uk, and he also hosts the biggest dyslexia group on Facebook as well. Patrick is an ex-teacher and dyslexia tutor, and he's now CEO of the Tutor Crowd. I want to move on now to one of the other cornerstones of the modern day education system, and that's reading. Stephen, I wonder if you can tell us a bit about the difficulties that a dyslexic has with reading, please.
Okay, we often think that dyslexics have trouble reading because of maybe the brain, or signalling into the brain, but actually we have found in research over the past well over 30 years that stress on the eyes can actually cause reduced reading ability. This is where, for example, you might have seen dyslexics wear coloured glasses with lenses in their glasses, and this is because within the eyes you have what's called cone cells. These cone cells interpret colour: red, green and blue. These three colours make the colour white. So when a dyslexic is reading on white paper, what happens is the cone cells struggle because they're interpreting the three colours, get stressed, and therefore slow reading ability down. Now you might think it can't cause that much reduction in reading. Statistics will show you that it's between 20 up to even 150% on an individual student that reading ability can be reduced by. I mean, if you just think of a student who reads 50 words a minute, if the student has 100% reduction, they lose an extra 50 words a minute, which you might think that's a lot, but in an exam or when you're reading a book, it slows you down. But the thing about dyslexics is the eyes get fatigued, stressed. The dyslexic will then be slower, but their brain is spending more time trying to interpret these fuzzy images it receives from the eyes. And that's why when you look at when a dyslexic, the dyslexic will say that when they're reading a book, the words are fuzzy on the paper. Some dyslexics say there's a river flowing through the page, or the words are vibrating. And teachers, a good instance you might see is a dyslexic moving the book up and down. And this is because the cone cells are struggling to interpret information. It sends it to the brain. The brain is spending more time. The brain gets stressed. The eyes get stressed, sends a message saying I'm getting stressed, and therefore the dyslexic has a headache or therefore become tired. So a way of doing this is to reduce the fatigue and increase the reading ability is using colours. Now, we'll discuss this in a lot more depth in other webinars, but if you do think, or especially with dyslexics, I would recommend parents speaking to your local optician to see if they can do a colour test. If they can't do it, there is organisations out there across the world who do it, if not online as well.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I think we'll make sure we put a link at the end of the webinar, or we'll tweet at the end of the webinar with a link to some of those organisations. Yeah. Patrick, what's your perspective on the difficulties that dyslexics have with reading?
If you look at a normal person reading, what they're doing is they're looking at the symbols and the words, and then they're processing this in the brain, and this becomes something of meaning. If you look at this from a dyslexic point of view, there's a difficulty in processing. This doesn't mean that they can't learn, but unless they change the way they read something, this is always going to be difficult. We're going to be looking at strategies and how to improve dyslexics reading in the future, but it's also important to emphasize that reading is not the only way to learn. There are other ways to learn. You can learn through listening to something, or if you can learn through pictures also. Stephen was talking about the picture way of thinking. It's not the only way. Dyslexics certainly need to address reading, but also they need to start looking at other ways to learn.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. That makes a lot of sense.